を開始いたします。午後は中間報告、それから講演と2つ混じる形になっておりますけれども、13時15分から15時15分ということで、講演の部分はビカシュ・ランジャンさんで、に講演をお願いしております。でその前に15分ですけども、実際には5分程度でよろしいということでしたので、村西先生から村西先生がご担当のプロジェクトに関するご紹介を得て、ランジャンさんのご紹介を得て、でランジャンさんのお話に入っていくという、そういう段取りでお願いいたします。では中間報告。はい。資料をお手元にお配りしておりますが、ございますでしょうか。ですね、ちょっとそれを、いや、それじゃないですね、もうこちらの方ですね、ごめんなさい。この顔写真の、ランジャンさんの顔写真のついているものに論文を数編つけております。で先ほどの村西先生にご紹介、全体を紹介していただいた後、ランジャンさんですね。で英語でご紹介します。You have the paper distributed, and he wrote several papers, and his presentation is based on those papers he wrote. So Dr. Bikash Ranjan, he joined the Grand Design program last year, and he is currently staying in India. And Professor Muranushi at Gakushuin University invites him to come to Japan for a couple of weeks. Okay, and he will leave for India tomorrow. And this is the last day. And taking advantage of this opportunity, this program asked Professor Muranushi and Dr. Ranjan to make a presentation to report their progress. And Dr. Ranjan is studying the Southeast Asia and the Southwest Pacific region international relations. And he used to live in Japan up to 2009. And we used to have the seminar on India business seminar, and he joined that program also. And his work experience you can read in his CV, and he talk about lots of things today. That is mostly relationship between India, China, and Japan, and the situation is changing. So he talk about those issues. Okay.
午前中も出てきましたので、あまり頻繁に出てくるものなので手短に申しますが、前年度からの引き続きで、今年度はインドと中国と日本との間の関係をインドの周辺国であるネパール、バングラデシュを中心とした地域を中心にして考えるという方向性を持たせて続けております。でつまりインドと中国というのは世界最大の人口大国であり、で非常に経済が発展しつつある国でもあり、また核兵器を持った国でもありということで、いろいろ注目しなければならないわけですけれども、十分な注目がされていないという意識があって、でその中で日本が何ができるかという点を含めながら考えているわけなんですが、特にインドの周辺国というのは、ネパール、バングラデシュ、あるいはミャンマーとかそういった国々をも含めて、インドと中国との間の力関係の競争的な関係が時々察知されるような地域です。 で1年目にも話が出てきたわけなんですが、真珠の首飾りというふうなストリング・オブ・パールスという言葉で示されるように、中国としてはできるだけ中国の西部地域から直接南下してインド洋に出たいという意識があり、でそのためにはパキスタンはもちろんのこと、ネパール、バングラデシュ、あるいはミャンマーという地域が中国にとって大切になってくると同時に、インドとしてはそのようなことをできるだけ防ぎたいという意識があるし、また当然今回のネパールとかインド東部とかバングラデシュのような地域においては資源、特に水資源の問題というのがあって、で枯渇していく水資源を中国とインドとの間でどのように協力あるいは争っていくかというふうな問題が将来深刻化してくると考えられるし、またネパールにおいてはマオイストと呼ばれるグループがある意味で時代錯誤的な政治勢力であるかのようにも見えるようなところがありますが、しかしともかく非常にその勢力を拡大してでネパールの中で台頭してきていて、でネパールの政治状態が大きく変わっています。でこのような意味でこのインドの周辺というコンセプトを使いながらインドと中国との間の関係を考えるということは非常に大切なことなのではないかなというふうに思います。でさらにそれに加えて過去数ヶ月くらいの間にミャンマーの情勢の変化というのがあって、でインドとしてもインド東部の国内問題を解決するためにはミャンマーも必要であるということになるし、ミャンマーとしては自分たちとしては中国だけに頼るわけにもいかないからバランスを取らなければならないということもあって、でネパール、バングラデシュなどだけにはとどまらないようなインドの周辺国間の間の関係というのが過去の最近過去の問題として出てきていると思います。でもう少し長期的な点から考えてみるならば、中国の西部の開発という問題があって、で中国が例えば新疆ウイグルのカシュガルを新たな経済特区に指定してくることによって、で西部の開発がどのように変わってきて、さらに新疆チベット全体としてどう変わっていくかというふうな問題もあり、非常にこの意味でも注目されるべきことであると思います。私自身は広い意味でこの問題に関連することとして、昨年の秋に中国の新疆ウイグルに行ってきて、でウルムチであるとかカシュガルであるとかタシュクルガンであるとか、そういった地域を視察というほどのことではありませんけれども、一応歩いてみて、で事実上のパキスタンと中国の境界付近にまで行って、でその間の少数民族間の問題調整の難しさであるとか、あるいはウイグル人が持っている特有の漢民族に対する意識であるとか、そういうようなことを多少観察する機会に恵まれたような気がしています。で短期間の滞在で何も言えませんけれども、彼らは一般的にウイグルの人たちは非常に物言いに対して慎重であって、で満足しているわけではないさそうだけれども、しかし別段時たま暴動を起こすということはあるが、何か政治的な行動も取れるわけではないというふうな状態にあり、逆にの方向から考えてみると、安定していても問題がなくなったわけではない。しかし経済発展は続くであろうし、そして中国の西部の状況は大きくこれからも変わっていくことが予想されるということで、このインド周辺という問題は単にインド周辺の独立国という問題のみにとどまらず、中国の西部がどう変わってきてという問題にもつながっていき、で結局はどの国が親中かどの国が親インであるかという問題だけではなくって、一つの例えばマオイストの勢力の中にも親中的な要素があり、親イン的な要素がありというふうなことで、もう少し噛み砕いて考えていかなければならないというふうなことなのではないかなというふうに思っています。で今後も特にバングラデシュやネパールやなんかの新聞を中心にしながら、彼らがどういう意識であるのかということに関して調べてみたいというふうに思っています。 で、今日はランジャンさんにもう少し広いコンテクストで、インドから今のミャンマーの話なんかは出てくるとは思いますが、その他に北朝鮮の話であるとか、あるいは東南アジアとの関係も含みながら、インドの外交をインド人研究者がどのように考えているか、その結果に関してどういうふうに彼は見ているか、どこを評価し、どこを弱点と考えるかというふうなことをお話しいただけるのではないかなと思います。実際日本の報道の中では報道されないことというのもインドではもうほとんど常識でありながら日本の報道の中では報道されないこともあって、でつい最近はそのオーストラリアの中でインド人が結構いろいろ不遇な目に遭ってるのだというふうなことを聞かされて、自分自身なんか随分そういうことを知らなかったなというふうに驚かされたような気がしました。ではそれでは前置きが長くなりましたのでランジャンさんにお願いします。
皆さんこんにちは。インドから来たビカスです。去年は経済とインドと日本の経済のために発表しました。去年日本の大きな事故が来たから、今年の話題はセキュリティ、安全保障のためにあります。でも日本語があまり喋れないから全部発表は英語です。Good afternoon, everybody. I am Vikas from India. Last year there was a major tsunami and earthquake in Japan. Thinking that this time I thought that I should give a presentation about security issues. Last time I had made a presentation about economic issues, because obviously whatever the security problems which happened in Japan last year, obviously those were natural, most of them were nature oriented, which we cannot do much. But at least as the dynamics last year changed in the region concerning the South China Sea, at present the North Korea, maybe some transition in Myanmar, thinking that I thought that maybe security issues would be a good issue to deal with this time. And this time, as Muranishi Sensei said, that I'll be talking about Bangladesh and Nepal, but I think I'm not talking about Bangladesh and Nepal today, because Bangladesh and Nepal may be important in themselves, but from my perspective, at present time, for Japan-India cooperation, I think it's maritime security which is more prominent. Maritime or cyber security which will become more prominent in the which will become more prominent at the present time. So that's why most of my presentation would be, and I'll let you know why, because of the Chinese military modernization and its assertions in the South China Sea, and its growing militarization because of the aircraft carrier, stealth aircraft, and anti-ship ballistic missiles and others, and growing downgrading US influences from the region. I'll come one by one about all these topics when I make my complete presentation. Thank you so much for inviting me over here, Professor Muranishi Sensei for his project, and Professor Anagawa Sensei. As I told you, in my view, there are three changing regional dynamics which happened in the region last year. First is South China Sea problem because of the conflict with Vietnam. Second is North Korea, and which is happening at present after the death of Kim Jong-il, because of the uncertainty which continues. And the third is transition in Myanmar. I'll not deal with North Korea over here because I know all the Japanese know about North Korea much better than an Indian, so that's why I should not talk about that. Here I will just concentrate on South China Sea and Myanmar. Vietnam-China conflict in the South China Sea changed the dynamics in the region. China was put politically on the back foot in the East Asia Summit on the issue. Because as I quoted in the media that when Prime Minister Wen Jiabao went for the East Asia Summit, he was being directly questioned about his stand on South China Sea, and which were not liked by Chinese, because that was the first time, because they never thought that they would be cornered that way. And after that, President Obama announced to focus on Asia Pacific. But in my view, though US has promised to engage more with Asia Pacific, even it has announced that it would make some bases in Darwin in Australia and those sort of things. But seeing the present global conditions and seeing US domestic politics, I think it's highly unlikely. US influence from the region is likely to degrade rather than increase. I don't think it's going to increase, at least at the present scenario, because again, just 2-3 days back, again Iran issues has come up. So I don't know whether it wants to withdraw from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and again engaging itself with Iran. And then you have financial crisis, which is financial crisis which had dominated the world. So that's why it seems to me very unlikely of US being re-engaging with the Asia Pacific region in a major way, or at least where it can secure everybody's interests, its allies' interest in the region. Because that's why I think South China Sea, the topic I have chosen, South China Sea is important from grand designs of Japan's perspective, because however Japan may try to ignore the dispute to be distant and unrelated to its national security, any negative development in the region shall impact Japan's own maritime dispute with China in the East China Sea and the inherent security structures in the region. Second, death of King Jong-il, as I told you before, has enhanced the security dilemma for Japan and the region. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about North Korea after this. And the third is transitionary processes in Myanmar has opened avenues for limiting China's influence in the Indian Ocean region. That's why I brought China over here, Myanmar over here. This is just to give a glimpse of what was the South China Sea territorial dispute all about, because who claims what? Because I think China and Brunei, China and Taiwan, they claim most of the South China Sea, because it's the China which claims most of the South China Sea, and Taiwan, since it claims to be part of whatever the historical background with China, so whatever China claims, that is being claimed by Taiwan. Philippines claims are based on Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, and all other claims are based on exclusive economic zone principles and the principles of continental shelf. So because of these, all these countries, like there are 7 claimants in the region, which are either making partially or total claim to the region. But only 2 countries make total claim to the region, that's it, China and Taiwan. All other claims are partial. Now, China's military modernization. Given Chinese military modernization, particularly naval modernization, its first aircraft carrier, a stealth fighter, and the long-range ballistic missile capable of hitting a moving ship at sea are emblematic of China's broadening strategic horizons, focusing on developing a regional anti-access or area denial strategy to other powers in the region. out of these, the development of DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile is quite significant. The DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile is a land-based system which would potentially target US carrier battle groups hundreds of miles away. It is armed with a maneuverable warhead that gives the Chinese military the ability to strike ships in the Western Pacific Ocean having a range in excess of 1500 kilometers. The target data for the missiles could be provided by a combination of long-range over-the-horizon radars using high-frequency sky waves along with indigenous satellites for surveillance, communications, and navigation data. I think most of you might be knowing that China has developed this satellite capability to locate they are like BEIDO satellite, BEIDOU, BEIDO satellite system, through which can target, locate any place within hardly 20 meters distance, something like that, with accuracy of 20 meters. So those sort of things, and combine this with this DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile, it will be difficult for the US to have major presence in the region in the long term. And as I have heard, obviously I have not written it over here, but it's not only DF-21D 1500 kilometers range. They have even met DF-31, which range is more than 2500 kilometers or so. So I think it's like a growing, some sort of growing power rivalry between US and China, rather than it's not only regionally located, or at least China does not view itself to be confined to the region. Its maritime interest. Its maritime interest has gone much beyond that. And according to American officials and the Director General of Taiwan's National Security Bureau, China has already begun to deploy the DF-21D. The aircraft carrier, in combination with the stealth fighter and the ballistic missile, will limit the preeminent power of the US in the region, as it can target US bases, US ships, and US carriers in Asia. In any future conflict, it would make much harder for the US to operate as freely as at present, which would in turn open up more room for China to flex its military muscles in Asia. Thus, these weapon systems will increase China's power manifold and will mark a significant leap forward in Chinese Navy's modernization, helping it in protecting its strategic and economic interests. Therefore, though China has repeatedly said that it would not resort to the use of force in resolving maritime disputes, countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, and others having territorial disputes with China are concerned about China's military modernization, as China's military modernization undermines US security guarantees and influences in the region. So that's why I think Japan needs to take this aspect into account for its future maritime imperatives. Some previous instances, I'll quote some previous instances where whatever problems occurred with the Chinese Navy, with other, including Japan. A scramble for maritime space and jurisdiction between Japan and China has been impacted by Chinese Navy modernization. Even in the midst of the triple tragedy which hit Japan in 2011, Japanese air and maritime space were violated by China. That's why you have so many, like if you read the defense report, you have so many scrambles which were taking place during the midst of the tragedy in Japan. Japan and China signed a treaty to resolve East China Sea dispute peacefully, but face-off between the two on Senkaku Daioh Islands in September 2010 hampered Japanese economy, as the export of crucial rare earth materials needed for Japan's high technology industries was stopped unannounced by China. In April 2010, a flotilla of 10 Chinese warships and submarines passed between the international waters of Japanese islands of Miyako and Okinawa to exercise in the Southeast Pacific. In July 2010, 2 Chinese warships repeated this deployment. In February 2010, China announced new oil and gas fields in the South China Sea. China's similar finds in the East China Sea had led Japan to appeal to an international maritime court. In January 2010, China announced tourism packages to some disputed uninhabited islands in the South China Sea. In May 2009, China imposed a summer fishing ban in the South China Sea and sent ships to enforce the ban, overriding Vietnamese protests about traditional fishing rights. All these instances reflect the fact that China is attempting to increase its share in the international maritime affairs, which would help it in controlling international shipping movements besides exploiting the mineral, oil, and fishing wealth. These steps of China would jeopardize Japan and other regional countries' interests. China has financially, militarily, and technologically supported Pakistan and North Korea, two unstable nuclear-armed nations, which can act as its proxies to distract and engage India, Japan, and South Korea in the hour crisis. Suppose if there is an election in Taiwan at present, suppose if China, not obviously not in this election, but suppose in the future, if China achieves its objective of unifying Taiwan with the mainland, its geographical obstacle to move eastwards to the West Pacific Ocean would be removed, because obviously that would become its own territory. Now I'll talk about India's maritime imperatives. India's maritime imperative is to secure a coastline of over 7,000 kilometers, exclusive economic zone of about 2.5 million square kilometers, and to have unimpeded access to the sea, to secure its international trade constituting about 35% of its GDP. About 60% of India's trade is towards west side and 40% towards east side. And but India is located in a region which is a haven for failed and failing states. Therefore, the threat of piracy, gun running, sea-borne terrorism, illegal immigration by the sea, operations against poaching of natural resources, smuggling, etc., continues to loom large in India's neighborhood. The possibility of Chinese assertion that energy security in the Indian Ocean could become a hostage to illegal activities by pirates or by other issues needs to be countered at the very incipient stage, as it will go against the dictum of Indian maritime strategy. Flush with over 2.5 trillion foreign exchange reserves, China is making efforts to secure logistic bases in the Indian Ocean region, commonly known as the string of pearls strategy, which has the potential to threaten not only India's maritime interest but also its security and stability. Obviously, everybody knows about the string of pearls like China has built around India, like in Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. So it has developed different bases, and all of them are like very strategic bases for China, because all of them surrounds China, surrounds India. Even on the global level, the increase in piracy in the Gulf of Aden and off the Somali coast mandated global efforts, where China also participated as an affected party. But the issue in itself should not be made an excuse to gain strategic advantages by China, because even if the problem of piracy in the Arabian Sea gets resolved, Chinese Navy is unlikely to return to China, especially after investing so much effort, resources, and international relations capital. By participating in curbing piracy, China has gained strong sea legs, vital lessons in interoperability, and above all, a say in global maritime matters. So that's why I think till now I talked about Chinese modernization and Indian maritime imperatives. But now I will talk about Myanmar, and I will give the reason why Myanmar should be the focus for the India-Japan cooperation. Because in my view, Myanmar can be a strategic base where China can be contained to some extent, because that will come later. before that, what changes are taking place in Myanmar? After decades of authoritarian rule and human rights violations, Myanmar seems in transition. The country, which had become an enigma and a cause of concern for the international community, has taken a number of steps which reflect a changed perception of the government in dealing with domestic and international audiences. The release of pro-democracy leader Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, former Prime Minister U Khin Nyunt, announced to form unions, establishment of the Human Rights Commission, removal of the ban on foreign media, including the internet, and stoppage of diatribes against the foreign media, the suspension of work on the Maidstone hydroelectric power project, signing of peace accords with ethnic groups like Shans and Karens, reflects the changing paradigms of the government's thinking. I'm not sure if you know that Myanmar has been under military rule most of its time since it gained independence. It's not the first time, but this government came to power in 1989 after overthrowing the democratically elected government, which could never take power, of Aung San Suu Kyi. But the recent transition in Myanmar is significant because it has been approved or whatever, even by even Aung San Suu Kyi, even US Secretary of State Ms. Hillary Clinton visited Myanmar, and even many other foreign medias and even Indian media are portraying that Myanmari generals are moving in a better, positive way. Myanmar's stand on the Maidstone project also suggests that Myanmar is ready to break its ties with its powerful neighbor China and engage with the international community. It is useful to point out that in the past, Myanmar's political and economic isolation provided space to China to deepen its economic engagement with the country. Most of you might be knowing that China has built Irrawaddy corridor through Myanmar to reach the Indian Ocean region through Sittwe port by connecting the Yunnan province and taking up lots of projects on the western side of Myanmar, and by making this port, Sittwe port, it has completed strategic entry into the Indian Ocean region. Whatever. But Myanmari generals were never comfortable in dealing with China and looked to India and Association of Southeast Asian nations to counterbalance Chinese influence. Myanmar has even announced to abandon its plan to build nuclear technology, as it may cause concern to the international communities. Obviously, at this stage, it's very early to say how these reforms in Myanmar would turn out to be. But in my view, these reform processes have given an opportunity to all the democratic countries in the region, and particularly those who have some problems with China, to engage with Myanmar to some extent. India has its own causes of dealing with Myanmar that I'll come later. So that's why I think why Myanmar is important from Grand Designs of Japan perspective. Indian Ocean region is likely to become new arena of strategic competition, with trade and resources security becoming critical. Together with growing Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region, maritime dimension will become increasingly critical, forcing rethink on naval capabilities and a way to limit Chinese influence in the region. This is the map of Indian Ocean region. If you see China has only 2 entry points to Indian Ocean. And these 2 entry points are either through Gwadar port in Pakistan or Sittwe port in Myanmar. For all other things, it has to come to the Indian Ocean through either to South China Sea or through either of these 2 ports. So that's why if we can we can woo back Myanmar from China, that would limit China's entry into Indian Ocean region and even in the Bay of Bengal side. And that may be a major containment of China in that aspect. Therefore, avenues of cooperation in Myanmar will provide ways to limit China's influence in the Bay of Bengal and in the Indian Ocean region. It will create a strategic buffer by bringing China's immediate periphery within economic and political influence. Why Myanmar is important from